What if the story you've been living your whole life wasn't actually the truth?
What if it was just a set of old beliefs created years ago that are still running the show today?
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Milt.
And this is Rewrite Your Story, the podcast where we explore how the narratives in your head shape your life
and how you can begin rewriting them with clarity, compassion, and tools you can actually use.
Let's dive in. Welcome back, everyone. This is Victoria, in case you forgot.
And I'm still Milton.
I feel like it's been forever because last week we had recorded those 2 episodes. Did we record last week? No, I don't think we recorded last week. Last week was chaos.
It was Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
Or it was
No.
No, we've just been gone for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then, so let me catch everyone up a little bit, because part of the reason we haven't recorded, we're not behind because we just posted episode 7. And so we'll get this out and we'll post episode 8. So we're not behind. But I realized that as we were talking about some of these things, and Victoria probably would have caught it too, but Victoria doesn't have access to all of the emails going back and
There's so
forth.
much change going on.
Yeah. That we were sitting with things, and I'd gone through the first 7 episodes and I started asking questions. What are we missing? And the good news is it looks like we're covering the material pretty okay. Whether everyone gets it or not, that's a whole different question. We'll get
That's
to
a
that.
whole different story.
However, we realized that we kind of needed to do a reset episode. So the next 2 episodes are going to be a little bit of a pulling out of the where we were going, and we're going to do a little bit of a grounding episode today. So, but before we do that, we have to do show and tell, right? And I've got show and tell.
Of course. Well, yeah, check-ins as well. How are you feeling, Milt?
I think I'm feeling okay. I had an amazing breakfast and Utah truffle for lunch. So, I'm on top of the world.
Fancy.
Sea salted chocolate. It was very fancy. Shout out to all our wonderful referral partners here in Cedar City who we work with. They dropped off some nice stuff for us at the office, and we're running our gifts around this next week. So as we settle into the giving season, the Christmas season, the Festivus season, the whatever season you might celebrate. All right, so show and tell.
Holiday. You could just say holiday season.
I like all of the seasons. Why can't we have all of the seasons?
Just all of it. Okay, go ahead. Show
I
and
want
tell.
a hat that has all of them on it.
That would be cool.
The Kwanzaa, the Hanukkah, the Christmas, the winter solstice, just all of them, because I want to celebrate as many. In other words, I want parties. I don't really care what the party's about. I just want good food, and I want good desserts, and I want hanging out with people. Okay, on that note, this is not a very spectacular fidget toy. However, I really love this fidget toy. So I apologize. So if you know what the symbol is, you know what it is. It's a friend of mine who also loves what this symbol represents. It's nothing bad. It's just Bitcoin. But we're kind of
you're making it very suspicious.
cryptic. Yeah. But I don't want to go on any Bitcoin tangents because we're not doing that. Another podcast for another day. But either way, so it was a friend of mine who gave this to me, and we share in the joy of Bitcoin together, and we think it's a really cool thing. He'd had these made for him, and so he brought this to me, and it's just simple. It's 2-colored. It looks like it's wood, but it's just got this pivot in the center, and the things can spin. And so you can kind of just sit and twist it around or whatever. But because I love texture, that's one of my favorite things, is having texture. Like my remotes have tracks because I run my finger between the buttons, because everything's a fidget toy to me. So yeah, that's our show and tell today. A homemade 3D printed cool little just spinner that's multicolored. I don't know how they put that together exactly, but it's really cool, and it looks like it's all stitched, like it's all leathered, stitched, which is cool.
It looks like leather and wood at the same time.
I just think it's so cool we get to do with 3D printers, and we've got our first Roots counseling fidget toys coming soon. So we're super excited about those. But what I think I love about this most is when you read the old stories of Christmas and they talk about that dad whittled the toy or mom sewed the toy together, This is kind of going back to that. We're going to get to make cool stuff for our kids that is individualistic to them, as opposed to just the mass produced things. And I don't know, that just to me sounds really like a cool way of, because I'm never going to whittle. I'll whittle my fingers off, and I'm never going to be that creative. But if a machine can make it look nice and I can do something and play with the programming, kind of like we do with the podcast, we try to make this creative, but we definitely use help. So this excites me about the 3D printer world. So there you go.
Awesome.
Okay.
Love it.
We are going to go through, well, let's be honest, I need that in my hands. We are going to go through the 7. Okay, here's the current fancy term.
Remember, there's a lot of change happening. We're in the process of so much refinement and clarification and all the things.
It's kind of like we've got the high level idea going, and then
Yeah.
we're building lower and lower, and then eventually we'll have a forward facing manual that's more user friendly and readable. I know I'm also going to integrate this with my book that I'm writing right now about my life and how I kind of use these things, even though I wasn't building the model back then, but it definitely, I was moving towards these things because these ideas are absolutely shared across many spectrums. And we're just hoping that the way we're explaining it gives the people who resonate with it a way to say, hey, I feel like I fit in this. Like, I feel like this model helps me the most. I remember in early, like one of the very first psychology classes, and Victoria can talk about this too, they go through all these developmental models, right? So you've got Erickson, and he's the guy that, like, if you ever had kids and you go to your pediatrician and they give you like a sheet that says at 6 to 12 months, your kid should do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, that's all Erickson stuff. Here's what they should be talking like. You've got Freud's developmental model. You've got all these people. I landed very heavily on a guy named Abraham Maslow. Him and Viktor Frankl, if you've never read A Man's Search for Meaning, I highly recommend everyone go read that. Logos therapy is amazing. Viktor Frankl was a Jew who was in the internment camps in World War II under Nazi control. And he has, just some awesome insight about how you survive through the most horrific, possible thing that you can live through. Yeah. Maslow and Frankl are in this kind of positive psychology world in the 70s. And Maslow came up with this triangle of needs that you ascend from one level to another. Another version of this would be Kohlberg's stages of moral development. And so when I was looking at our model, I started looking at it and realizing, oh, this is not as much a therapeutic model as it is a developmental model. This is really a model of if you can use this for whatever stage of life you're at. And the reason that you can is because of these guiding propositions that we're going to call them right now, because that's what they're called in the book. However, it's probably not the name we're going to land on. Philosophies, guiding principles, any kind of thing like that. But we want to be clear. These are guiding. Mm-hmm. They're not rules. So I'm not trying to prove the truthfulness, the veracity of these things. We're not trying to tell you, you have to believe this all.
Right.
What we're saying is, we'll just kind of jump into the first one because I really like the metaphor we came up with for this. These are 7 ways to check the compass. And I like the idea of a compass because a compass is telling you where you're going and the direction you're going in. It's not going to tell you when you arrived. Mm-hmm. So these are the things you pull out and you can kind of check yourself and say, all right, am I using these ideas to see me and the world around me? Because if I do that, if I'm using that compass back in my fun Boy Scout days, which I never figured out how to use a compass, just so we're clear, because if any of my Scout leaders see this, they'll be like, you don't know how to use a compass. I don't.
Oh my gosh.
But good news, I know lots of people who do. And sometimes you just have to hook your caboose or your train card to theirs and hope that they don't lead you astray. But the compass is not designed to tell you when you arrived. It's just going to keep telling you this is a good direction to go in. The same way that the North Star is a good example of this, which is one of the original compasses in the human history. So when we establish these 7 propositions or guiding principles, We absolutely used influences of where we came from. So if you're a DBTist or you've ever heard or been a part of a DBT group, you will hear a lot of carryover from this, because if a philosophy is good, I'm going to take it. If
Yeah.
it's not good, I'm going to leave it behind. And shout out to Marsha Linehan. She came up with 7 great assumptions, and we've reformed some of them, but some of them we kept very similar. So yeah, if it's a good idea, use it. There's no reason to reinvent a wheel. Okay, so the very first compass. Now, here's where it's funny. We came up with these 7 guiding principles and we put them in order of 1 to 7, not because that's the order they're supposed to be in, but then we figured out which pillars they go to. And so as we go through this, you're going to hear that, like, pillar learn has proposition 4 and 3, not 1 and 2.
Yeah. But I
So
think that falls into just like how this model is becoming anyways, right? This isn't a very, this is the first step, this is the second, this is the third, this is
yes,
how it's supposed to go. It's flowy, it flows, and you can diverge and divert to different areas and pull things to make it work for you, however that is. So I think it's great that even our principles are flowy like that.
so
Yeah.
really take away value structure from the number. These are just 7 guidelines. You know, in Buddhism, they have their 4 noble truths. You've got all these things, but I don't know that even they would say, well, I don't know. I'm not a Buddhist. I shouldn't speak for the Buddhist community, but they might say that all of the noble truths are important. Okay, so let's go to the proposition number 1. People are doing the best they can with what they have in this moment. This is just, it's such a foundational premise, because we talked about that balance of change and acceptance, right? We talked about that idea that you can't actually start making effective change in your life. So if you just run to change, we're putting all our energy on change, teeter totters work the way they do. So if you're putting all your effort on change and you haven't actually stood back and said, what am I capable of? What have I done in the past? Okay, here's the metaphor I want to go with. You spend $5,000 to go hear an amazing life coach on a 3-day retreat, right? And so you've invested a ton of money. And you go in and you've got your notebook and you're taking all these notes, and you're going to come in and you're going to change your life. Except that you're not even starting with the premise that you only have what you have right now. So it's not that we're saying this is the end point. It's that we're saying you can't effectively look at change if you don't accept who and where you are in the first place.
Yeah.
And I know we
100%.
went over that a lot in the learn pillar, but I want to make sure we're talking about it in this way, because there's so much change energy out there, so much anxiety around trying to push people to do things because that makes them better. Well, it may make you better, but you may never achieve it. I use this analogy all the time. I will never be highly athletic. My genes are not necessarily designed for it. And I have sat on a chair for 40 some odd years, minus a short little 4-year time frame where I actually exercised and worked out and got healthy for a little bit. But I couldn't just say, I want to go play, because I've never used up any of my eligibility to play sports in NCAA. I could go start working and say, I want to try out and play on an NCAA team. Now, it could happen. I could spend a ton of energy. I would have to practice. I would have to give up my job. I would have to hire a coach. I would have to run drills every day. I would have to exercise. I would have to eat better. There were a lot of things that I could do. But even if I did all that work, there's no guarantee that I'm going to be good enough to get to an NCAA school, even at the Division III level. Maybe, but I'd never get drafted in the NBA at this age.
Right.
So there's going to be a top level of skill set there. And if I did get drafted in the NBA, it would be because it would be a PR stunt, and I'd have to be called grandpa.
Oh my gosh.
So let's just say that even happened, but I would never be as good as the best players because one, they're stronger and faster and younger. And I'm only going to go down in my abilities, even if I spend every day working on them, assuming that I don't injure myself along that journey. Just because we want something doesn't mean that we have the capabilities of getting there. And that isn't bad. So if I'm changing towards something that is absolutely unattainable for me, I am not going to be an NBA player at 48 years old. I'm probably never going to be an NCAA player, not even division, whatever the lowest division is. I thought it was 3, but I don't know. And in fact, most high schoolers will kick my trash. In fact, almost all high schoolers that play any kind of basketball would kick my trash now because I'm not good. Bouncing the ball is one of the things that I can do. Knowing that this is a motion that you do when you shoot a ball. I know that. But I didn't play at all really growing up. I don't have those skills and I didn't develop my body in a way to prepare for that. I can shoot for whatever goal I want. I just have to accept. I don't have to, but you have way less misery in life if you only accept where you are right now. Not that you can't change towards greater or better or even best versions of you, as long as you understand what the best version of you is.
Yeah.
And I haven't discovered that yet for me. So why would I say I'm doing the best I can? That's it. I'm doing the best I can right now. And I've got more to learn. And I'm excited about what I've got to learn and where things are going to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with that, the biggest thing that stands out and the thing that I mention all the time, whether it's in groups that I'm teaching or even just talking to my cohort friends, you have to recognize where you are right now, like you're saying,
Yeah.
right? You have to recognize what the reality is in this moment. It's not about what we
Not
want
whether
it to
you
be, what we
like the
wish it could
reality.
be. Yeah, it's about what it is. And if we are working on this change and trying to create this change for something that we wish reality was, then how much change is actually going to happen, right? Or is it just going to perpetuate in maybe harmful ways or just whatever, right? We're not going to get the actual goal that we want because we're not working with what we actually have. Does that make sense?
And think about how that turns up the definition of failing.
Right. Because we're
Because you're
setting these
actually
expectations that
right.
are unachievable.
Yeah, I started a book on a trauma method this week, and one of the goals of this book is that they hope that their model will eventually change the world. Now, if their standard is if it changes we only succeed if we change the world. And in fact, I was at a meeting last night where a guy was like, why don't people talk about X, Y, and Z? They should know these things. It would make their lives better. And it's funny because he's miserable and the people who wrote this book may not be miserable because they have a goal, they have a desire to move the needle. They also understand the limitations of that. This man is suffering because he believes that the way he sees the world is the most effective way, which is fine. And he believes that if everyone saw it his way, everyone would be better. He may be right, but he suffers because he can't force people to change, even though he's about as anti-force as it comes. And that's kind of funny.
The irony.
Cool. Number 2.
So that's our first pillar. Yeah, that's or not our pillar. Sorry, proposition, philosophy.
Proposition, principle. We'll call it principle. I like principle. Guiding
We've
principle.
said a lot of P words lately.
Principle, progress.
Oh, with principle.
The best
Okay,
that I can do.
guiding principle.
I love it.
So that's guiding principle number 1. Cool. So now we're gonna jump into 3 and 4, which is I like how it said this, the clarity anchors. So learning from reality. I think one of the biggest struggles, I've experienced this, almost everybody that I talk to experiences this. It's a very universal thing, I think, of the feeling or the thought or the behaviors that come from why is this happening to me? why am I having to go through this? Why did this happen to me? And or even just like it came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting this, that kind of thing. And then we try to fix things based off of that kind of context, I think, in the sense of
Yeah.
like, got fired from your job out of nowhere. It felt like out of nowhere. And then go to a next job and then get fired from that job out of nowhere. And instead of the mindset of saying, like, why does this keep happening to me? I'm doing nothing, all those things, we're not allowing that perspective of, okay, what is the common denominator, right? Or what is the common theme? What has happened to lead up to that point? All of that to say, so this principle, this guiding principle, is talking about the fact that all actions, behaviors, thoughts, feelings, emotions, etc., they're all caused. There's all some type of reason for them, right? They come from somewhere. It's not just out of the blue. And I think that's hard, right? Because I think when we experience those painful situations, to then say, to take the time to figure out where that came from or why that happened, I think that can be one of the hardest things in the healing journey, because
Yeah.
it's so much easier, right, to push that blame, right? Or to just say, like, it's not my fault, or
Well, why, once you have a why, it's really funny. Your brain, as soon as it gets the why, it can move on.
right.
But until it has a why, it can't move on. Think about in every detective or crime show, they're looking for the person who did the wrong thing. And as soon as they find that person, they can answer more of the why, what's wrong with them or whatever. But even if they can't answer all the questions, as long as they can target in on a why, all of a sudden their brain says, okay, now we can stop spending energy on this and go back to doing whatever works for us. So why actually speeds up our process. That's why these things feel painful, because we're asking you to slow down the process
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
not settle for why.
Yeah, but kind of dive into it more, right? And that's where we talked about. So this principle 4 and 3 go into the learn pillar, and that's what we talked about for the first, what, like 6 episodes. Is
Yeah.
that's what the learn pillar is about, right? Is taking that step back and actually putting in the work to figure out the why and figure out what that why is,
Well,
see where that's coming from.
the phrase is looking for cause, not fault. So as long as the why is in that curious, help me discover the clues, as opposed to that's the blame, you're the blame, or you're the blame,
Right.
whatever. We have to move away from that fault idea. And that's a hard one to give up, because we
Yeah.
really like you're the bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Or I am horrible and I'm never going to change, right?
Easy.
Yep, 100%. And then the next one that is hit on in the learn pillar is the principle 3. So new behaviors and understandings must be learned across all contexts. That was a lot. That was kind of the technical, but it's basically saying, and we talked about this, we hit on this, it's that
Yeah.
generalization kind of idea in an effective way. And I think that's the kicker, right? Because I think it's very easy to generalize skills that we have picked up throughout our whole life, and maybe they're not very effective. Maybe they lead to us feeling more pain or more suffering or whatever it might be. And so finding new skills and using new tools that are effective and that do help us get to that life that we want for ourselves, or that best version of ourselves, or whatever.
So there's a study, or some studies, that found that in order for someone who has a substance abuse problem, they generally need, if they actually need treatment level. So we're talking about substance abusers who need treatment to actually get better. Typically, they need to be touched in treatment 7 times. They will have had to have landed in treatment 7 times before they get to recovery phase. And the reason for that is, if you think about it in terms of what happens when you go into a 30 or 60 or 90-day program, your entire life is stripped away, right? You get to focus on you and your problems, and you've got all this support around you. And theoretically, if it's a positive program, or a program that's strength based as opposed to shame based, you're going to be building yourself up, and you've got all this strength and tenacity. It's almost like the 3-day training that I was referencing in the first principle. Then you go back to life. And where did you learn how to use these strength based tools?
A very controlled environment.
And none of that exists in real life.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that makes recovery hard is that you learn these skills in a certain place, but then you have to go apply them in real life. I'm not saying that means that the 6 times didn't work. It means that it can take that amount of time to learn how to take that skill that you're learning in a controlled setting and put it across your whole life.
Right. Yeah. No, 100%. And in simple situations, in the sense of like everyday situations. So like we talked about, I think we hit on last time, I hate going to the store. I get very overwhelmed and overstimulated when going to the store, and having to remember to not remember, but like even just put in the work to use the coping skills that I talk about all the time in our groups, right? And that I teach and that I preach and that I love and all those things. It's easy when it's in a group setting, right? Because it's again a very controlled environment and there's very little, oh, I'm blanking on all my scientific terms. Variables. Got it. There's not as many
You're
variables.
sounding like me, and that's scary because you're much younger than me.
No, that's a no.
That
You
just
can say
means,
variable.
no, I'm talking about the fact that you couldn't remember a word.
Oh,
But that goes to show how much she's learning and how much effort she's putting in, and her brain is just tired.
I'm so tired, guys.
Because Victoria did great her first semester, right? Yay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
celebrate that. You're almost a baby therapist.
I know. That's exciting. Anyways, there's not as many variables, right? When I'm in that setting of a DBT group or a group that I do for my internship, whatever it might be, compared to one, then having to actually transfer the skills to myself, right? And instead of going into that teaching perspective, it's actually the student perspective or the learner perspective, and then actually do it. And I'm losing my train of thought, but recognizing I lost my train of thought. You distracted me with the school stuff.
So one of the references it gives is prototypes. And I really like this idea. So I'm kind of a Kickstarter junkie. I know that if I was filthy rich, I would probably buy a lot more things off of Kickstarter than I should, because I think it's so cool. I love watching people figure out cool new ways to do things. And so that's what excites me about things like Kickstarter. My wife, however, does not share in my joy of all the new things that I've purchased that looked really cool on Kickstarter and are not very cool in real life. The headphones that I purchased because the connector was made of gold. That's how they sold it. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, I want some gold in my life. And who doesn't need a gold connector?
Right.
And then all of the connectors changed to USB-C, and now everything I have is USB-C. So the cool thing about watching things get built is that and especially when they show you the testing phase, right, is that you see how they're trying to think up all the scenarios that this piece of whatever they're inventing, like headphones, right, like the wires on the headphones, they're trying to come up with every scenario that could hit this headphone wire because they want it to last. Like if they put a lifetime warranty on something, they want it to last as long as they can, so they're only replacing a few of them and not all of them. And then they'll go through thousands of bend tests and weather tests and wind tests and all these things. Not because I'm always going to come up against those problems. In fact, most of the time, the biggest problem that any of my stuff is going to come up against is, did I put it where I remembered? And did I not stack 10 things on top of it so that the case breaks? Or did I not take it out of my pocket before I put it in the washing machine? If we're talking about headphones. And some of the companies do that. They'll send it through the washing machine because they want to know how it's going to hold up. All of that is a version of learning how to generalize your strength across. We're learning to test the prototype or test the skill across things, not because we know how it's going to respond, because we want to see how it's going to respond. And then even after all of that, and I'll use a small example from my personal life because that's where all of my good therapy comes from, is where we screw up at home. My wife and I had been having multiple conversations lately about one of the struggles in our relationship is that we're not very good at validating. And I'm an over accountable person, and she doesn't like accountability because that makes her vulnerable. And I over own, and she doesn't own. And it's not that she doesn't own things, it's just she doesn't own things in an outward way that the way I do, right? So it's just a different style. And over the last couple of weeks, there have been a couple of times where she's actually said, "Oh yeah, I absolutely screwed up on this." And it was so great. And I was trying to praise it because it's one of those things that I want to see again. And I want her to know that I'm recognizing an effort that's being made, and, vice versa. And when I do something well, I hope that she recognizes it because it also tells me what validates her, right? Because we've been prototype testing for 25 years and we still haven't figured it out. And we did all this. We had these great conversations and recognition. And then yesterday morning, she was working on something, and I asked her where something was that needed to be in it. And she said, "Did you not read it?" And I said, "I did read it." And then another person chimes in and says, "I need this to say this," which was what I was trying to say, but I didn't say it very clearly. I was just, "See, I told you I was right," which is always a good way to start a conversation.
Oh yeah.
Either way, that set up us having a fight that we've had lots of times where I'm mad now that she's not taking accountability and she's upset because of how I approached it. And I texted her last night as I kind of sat with it all day. And we had a fine resolution by the end. Sometimes the best way to resolve things is, "Hey, what can I do to help you?" And she needed hamburger browned and noodles cooked. And so I went and did that. Yay.
Nice.
Because I can't talk at that moment. Either way, I sent her a text that night that just said, "Hey, look, I'm really ashamed of not myself. I'm ashamed that I engaged in this behavior in this way, even after we've had a couple of times where it's been really good."
Mhm.
And then, she was being caring and sweet, and it's like, "Well, you shouldn't be ashamed." And I said, I want to be clear. I'm not feeling shame overwhelmingly. I'm saying that I have a value of this. And I'm ashamed that I didn't act in that value, which is in this case is the community value between me and her. It's not just my value; it's our value and how we connect. And I want to have that shame as a reminder so that I can work on that again, because that's how we use emotions effectively. We don't run and say, "Oh, well, the system's broken. Throw that whole all the effort we've put into that prototype because it didn't pass that one test."
Yeah.
It just didn't pass that one test. And it may not have passed that one test because it was at a fail point anyway, because that was the fail point it was going to have. In other words, I was tired. She was tired. We had just woken up. There were some variables that had played into that. And those variables contributed to us not having a positive conversation. And one of the variables was I sensed that she was not happy with the way I approached it, and she was irritated with how I approached it, that
Right.
feeling state. And so that created weakness in the efforts that we've done. And then the weakness created a fail point. It was a fail point, not a failure. And I really like that metaphor. I think it's so much funner or better to have an idea of fail points. And then we can, again, going back to that principle number one, we're doing the best I can with the skills that we have in this moment. That may be a point. And in fact, that was one of the things that we talked about was maybe it's not a good idea if I hit this level of intensity that I need to go walk away for a second so that that intensity isn't influencing the rest of the conversation. Or when she gets to a shutdown point, I can recognize, oh, that's a shutdown point. That's not her trying to. In other words, you come up with different ways of understanding what the fail points mean so they're not overinterpreted. And then you're still in the looking at the causes of behavior as opposed to the blaming. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I definitely think so. And I think it's a great example too of recognizing that these aren't quick fixes. And when we use these principles as guiding principles rather than very strict, this is the only way kind of thing, it takes away that idea of grace and idea of recognizing we're humans. And there's going to be so many different, again, variables, things, vulnerability factors that come into play that's going to make a skill not as effective as it was in a different situation. And that's fine. That doesn't mean, like you said, that we're a failure or that we are horrible or awful or whatever. No, it just means we were tired, we were hungry, we didn't have the capacity to do it the way that we did the day before or whatever it might be.
Well, and just to add to the metaphor, the difference is if we look at ourselves and we try to say, okay, I want to mirror my life off of that person that I find successful. It's go to any bookstore or bookstore online now and go see how many titles are in the self-help section. And a lot of those books are asking you to pour yourself into their mold. Here's the mold. Go do it. If you've ever tried to fit yourself into a mold, you're not very moldable. We try to fit ourselves in the mold. That's why I like the prototype idea. I'm building who I am. I'm building the relationships that I want. And I'm going to constantly keep going back to the drawing board. The idea that if we're never a finished product is such a cool idea, to me anyway, because I don't want to be finished. I want to continue to evolve, to grow. I want to take breaks at times. That's what vacations are for. But I don't want to just try to fit in someone else's mold. I'm okay if I can say those parts of their mold are good and I want to try to incorporate them into mine, but I still have to start with the mold that's me.
Yeah.
And if I don't start with me first, who I am, where I come from, what I bring to the table, I'm never going to fit in their mold, even at all, sort of. I can incorporate their mold into me better than I can fit into their mold. And so I can take all these great lessons from all these people and I can apply them in ways that are useful and helpful and understand that I'm going to apply them in the way that works for me, not necessarily the way that looks like everyone else.
Yeah.
It's a concept of agency. And I'm not talking about free will. I'm talking about knowing who you are, knowing your person, accepting who you are in this moment, and understanding that you're still a work in progress is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because a work in progress is most people I know don't just buy a home and then do nothing with it. Most people I know repaint, buy new furniture, put new carpet down, refresh it. We all clean, theoretically. Most of us, my nightstand would dictate otherwise. But like we all clean every once in a while to get it back to a state of order and comfort. That's not just accepting the reality. And I'll use my dad. My dad loved remodeling. Just wasn't good at it. He was not, but he was always proud that he did it. The corners weren't flush. We would never be a show house. And yet we remodeled our little 1,000 square foot home to make it work for 7 people. And we did it time and time again. And we had one girl besides my mom amongst 4 boys, which means she had her own room and the rest of us are sharing. And we had one bathroom.
Oh.
So we were remodeling all the time for functional use or fixing up this old house because we had to make it work because that's where we lived. And it was always cool to watch my dad at the end of a project, not because he had pulled off a masterpiece. He was not a craftsman. He was a tinker.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always proud at the end. And he never really much worried about the fact that it didn't line up exactly, that the drywall didn't always fit square, or the mudding didn't look, as I look up at my ceiling that has some really great texture on it, that was done by a real quality craftsman. Ours never looked that way. And my dad was proud of what he did. And I loved that. I didn't love it when I lived in it because I was like, oh, I don't want to show my friends. This is embarrassing. And I got over that as I got older because I realized what the work he had done.
Yeah.
And that was pretty
And
awesome.
and the happiness that it brought him, right? And I think
Yeah.
looking at that from like a healing perspective too, be prideful, be happy of the progress that you've made, be happy
Yeah.
of where you came from and how far you've come from what you were like when you were 16, 24, 42, whatever, and
Yeah.
recognize like you can still always grow and you've done so much growth, and be sure to embrace that happiness, embrace that, again, be proud of yourself for that rather than I'm
And let it
not
be
there
what it
yet,
is.
it's not enough, right?
Yeah. And let it be what it is.
Yeah.
If I look at my life, I'm 48 now. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been a therapist, I think, for 13. So in the mental health space for 15 years. Because I graduated with my bachelor's at 32. And I got my master's when I was 35-ish, 36-ish, one of the two. I think it was 36. And so, yeah, whatever that math is, because I'm a social science major and I don't have to math. I have calculators. I look at who I was as a therapist then and who I am now. And I'm an extremely better craftsman than I used to be. And yet I still have sessions with clients where they're like, yeah, none of this that you just did worked for me. Now, year one of therapy, I was not very flexible. Year 13 or 14, whatever I am now, I had an amazing session with someone who was telling me, here's all what didn't work for me. And whether this individual comes back or not, it's not the point. One, I was so proud that they told me. I was so happy that they shared with me. I was so praising of everything they brought to the table. And I absolutely tried to show them that I listened to it and said, here's how I can try to make adjustments for that. And I want to make sure that I'm not making excuses for any of those things. And I can tell you what I was thinking, but I want to make sure if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And so I'm not hanging on to it. That's not year one therapist.
Yeah.
Year one therapist is my dad finishing a project. Year 13, 14, whatever this is now, it's more of a craftsman. It's more of I'm fine tuning. And even then, the craftsman doesn't always deliver the project or the product that the person wants. The prototype is still a work in progress. And that feels like a really good place to stop.
Perfect. Awesome.
Because
I think that's good. I think the thing with this, going back to our foundational pieces of the SaaS model, is that there is a lot. And so I think the more we can break it up will be more beneficial, just because it allows more time to kind of process what is being said and all the things that are being said. So
yeah. Cool.
sweet. Takeaways?
Takeaways, compass,
I love
pointing in
that.
a direction. And here's where I didn't go with that. If I'm looking at a map and I'm just saying this is the path I'm going to go, as I continue to go through, think about all the things I get to see if I focus on how I'm getting there, as opposed to when I arrive. Because I don't know about you, but I've done hikes, and a lot of the times I'm just like, when do I get to the end?
When is this over?
And all along the way, I'm missing all of these things. The compass is just that thing that keeps us along the way.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an awesome idea. I'm not trying to get to some finished mold. I want to continue to be a work in progress and keep moving in the direction that works.
Yeah, I love that idea of a compass, and I love that idea of the go-to phrase of it's not about the destination, it's about the journey you took to get there, or whatever that is. I think I butchered it, but I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. And again, just giving yourself the space to be proud of yourself for the progress that you've made, for the progress that you will continue to make, and allow yourself to feel that. I think we are very hard on ourselves very often, and so create that space for yourself because you deserve it. Everyone does. So, yeah. Cool.
Signing off.
Awesome. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Rewrite Your Story. Take a moment to notice what story showed up for you today.
Remember, you're not your story. You're the one holding the pen.
And each moment is a chance to write a new chapter.
Be sure to join us next time as we keep exploring the path towards self-alignment.
We'll see you then.